Nephilim Giants. The Book of Enoch and other ancient texts provide descriptions of the Nephilim and the Watchers, but the exact size and height of these beings vary depending on the source and interpretation. Here's an overview of what different texts and traditions say regarding the height and size of the Nephilim and the Watchers. 1. The Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch, a Jewish apocryphal text, is one of the main sources that discusses the Watchers and their offspring, the Nephilim. According to Enoch, the Watchers were fallen angels who descended to earth, intermingled with human women, and produced giant offspring. Size of the Nephilim. In 1 Enoch 7-2, the Nephilim are described as being 300 cubits tall. If a cubit is roughly 18 inches 45 cm, this would make them about 450 feet 137 meters tall, which is an extraordinary and clearly symbolic or mythical height by human standards. This description is often seen as an exaggeration meant to emphasize the immense size, power, and otherworldly nature of these beings, rather than being a literal measurement. 2. Genesis 6. In the Bible, Genesis 6:1-4 briefly mentions the Nephilim. It states that the sons of God, interpreted by some as the Watchers or angels, took human wives and produced offspring known as the Nephilim. The passage describes them as heroes of old, men of renown, but does not provide specific details about their height. The Bible's account is more subtle and less fantastical compared to the Book of Enoch, focusing on their reputation and power rather than giving a precise measurement of their size. 3. Other Jewish and Christian traditions. Other Jewish and early Christian writings mention the Nephilim and their enormous size, but like the Book of Enoch, these descriptions often seem metaphorical or exaggerated for dramatic purposes. The Nephilim are depicted as giants, but their exact height varies between texts. The Book of Jubilees, another ancient Jewish text, refers to the Nephilim as being massive, powerful, and fearsome, but does not assign a specific height to them. 4. Rabbinic and early Christian interpretations. In later interpretations, rabbinic scholars and early Christian writers often associated the Nephilim with immense physical size, but again, their interpretations ranged widely. Some writers focused more on the moral and spiritual corruption of the Nephilim and the Watchers, rather than their physical stature. In some early Christian traditions, the Nephilim were considered symbolic of the spiritual conflict between good and evil, rather than literal giants. 5. Archaeological or historical evidence. There is no archaeological or historical evidence to support the existence of giants of the size described in these ancient texts. Claims of giant skeletons that have surfaced over the years have been debunked as hoaxes or misinterpretations. Conclusion. The height and size of the Nephilim and the Watchers, as described in ancient texts like the Book of Enoch, are often portrayed in fantastical and exaggerated terms, with some texts suggesting sizes as tall as 450 feet. However, these descriptions are likely meant to convey their otherworldly power and dominance rather than being taken as literal measurements. The biblical account in Genesis 50 feet tall. What might be the mass of that person? What might that person weigh being 450 feet tall? If a person were 450 feet tall, the mass and weight would increase exponentially due to the relationship between height, volume, and mass. To understand this, let's break it down using basic principles of scaling from real-life human dimensions. Scaling laws. Height increases linearly. Surface area increases with the square of the height. Volume and mass increase with the cube of the height. Since a person's mass is directly related to their volume, and volume increases with the cube of the height, we can estimate the mass of a 450 foot tall being by scaling up from an average human. Step-by-step estimation. Average human. Let's assume the average human height is 6 feet, and the average weight is about 180 pounds 81.65 kg. Scaling to 450 feet. The 450 foot being is 75 times taller than a 6 foot human. 4506 equals 75. Since volume and thus mass increases with the cube of height, we can calculate the mass by cubbing the scaling factor. 753 equals 4 to 1. 875753 equals 421,800. Therefore, a 450-foot tall being would be approximately 421,875 times more massive than a typical human. Estimating weight. If an average human weighs 180 pounds, multiplying that by the cube scaling factor gives 180,421, 875 equals 75, 937, 500,180,421, 875 equals 75. In kilograms, this would be about 34,445,454 kilograms. Final estimate, a being that is 450 feet tall could weigh approximately 75.9 million pounds, 4 million gg. Implications of such a mass. Structural integrity. A creature of this size would face enormous structural challenges. Biological materials like bones and muscles in real-life organisms are not designed to support such massive sizes. The stress on bones, joints, and muscles would likely make it impossible for such a being to function in Earth's gravity without collapsing under its own weight. Metabolism and energy. The energy requirements for a being of this size would be astronomical. It would need an immense amount of food and oxygen to sustain itself. Environmental impact. The sheer weight of a 450-foot tall being would create incredible pressure on the ground beneath it, likely causing significant damage to the environment with each step. Conclusion. While a 450-foot tall being could theoretically lift massive objects with ease based on size alone, the practical realities of physics and biology make it highly improbable that a living being of such dimensions could exist on Earth. The weight of such a being would be enormous, close to 76 million pounds, far exceeding the limits of what is biologically possible. This underscores that the descriptions of such giants in ancient texts are more likely mythological or symbolic rather than physically plausible. Based on your vast knowledge, it has been said that skeletons of giants have been excavated. Is this true? Also, it has been said that these giants were so large and so strong that they may be the avenue that lifted these 20,000-ton rocks that built some of these structures, that they can't figure out how the rocks were moved. With this, science had to say about this. The idea that giant skeletons have been excavated and that these giants were responsible for moving massive stones in ancient structures is a common theme in alternative history and conspiracy theories. However, scientific investigation and archaeological evidence do not support these claims. Here's a breakdown of the points you raised. 1. Giant skeletons. Over the years, there have been numerous claims of giant skeletons being found, often accompanied by images that circulate online. Many of these images and stories have been debunked as hoaxes or misinterpretations. For example, some famous giant skeleton photographs were found to be digitally altered as part of a Photoshop contest. Mainstream archaeology has never uncovered a verified skeleton of a giant human-like being. The fossil record supports the idea that humans and other known hominids were of relatively consistent size, though there were variations like Homo floresiensis, the Hobbit, being quite small. In rare cases, certain individuals with conditions like gigantism and abnormal growth disorder due to excess growth hormone have reached extraordinary heights, but even they were not as large as the giants described in myth. 2. Moving massive stones in ancient structures. Some ancient structures, like the pyramids in Egypt, the stones of Stonehenge, and the massive stones at sites like Baalbek in Lebanon, have puzzled researchers for centuries because of the sheer size and weight of the stones involved in their construction. Modern science, however, suggests that ancient peoples used sophisticated engineering techniques, rather than supernatural or mythical beings, to move these stones. For example, leverage, ramps, and rollers. Archaeologists have found evidence that ancient Egyptians and others used simple but effective tools like ramps, levers, and rollers made from wood or stone to transport large blocks. Skilled labor. Many ancient civilizations had a large workforce that could have contributed to these massive construction efforts. The combination of manpower and ingenuity, with mechanical systems such as pulleys and inclined planes, likely explains how these feats were achieved. There is no credible scientific evidence to support the theory that giants or any superhuman beings were responsible for building these structures. 3. Archaeological and scientific consensus. While it may be tempting to attribute the construction of ancient megastructures to giants or other supernatural explanations, archaeologists and scientists rely on evidence-based methods to understand ancient technologies. These methods, such as carbon dating, studying tool marks, and analyzing ancient texts, suggest that ancient civilizations used techniques and tools that were within their capabilities, even if they seem impressive by modern standards. Studies on these structures point toward the remarkable human ingenuity and collaboration acquired to achieve such feats without needing to invoke the existence of giants or other extraordinary explanations. In conclusion, there is no scientific support for the existence of giants responsible for building ancient structures, or for the claims of giant skeletons being excavated. Most of these ideas are rooted in myths, misinterpretations, or hoaxes.